Hello, everybody. This is Dan Bigman, your GPR professor from LearnGPR.com, and we're coming at you today with another live interview on the GPR Hot Seat with Mike Parilac from Staking You and Planet Underground TV. I'm very, very excited about this interview, and Mike brings a lot of knowledge, a lot of experience. He's been around the damage prevention industry for a long time, and I think he's gonna add a lot of value to all of you. So, you know, I want to just Staking You, right? So just to give a little bit of background about Mike, and then he'll kind of tell us his story before we jump into the role and responsibility of excavators in identifying and protecting buried facilities. But, you know, Mike, Staking You is the leading, I would say, you know, training company for EM locators for sure. They also do, you know, GPR training as well. Planet Underground TV is a video-based platform where they produce unique content for the damage prevention excavators industry. And so, you know, hit the links below in the description of this video and connect with them. Go find Planet Underground TV on YouTube. They got, I guess, over 60 videos now free, just great information. Go to their website as well. And it's just, you know, he and I, right, we met actually, I'll give a little bit of background, okay? We both live in the US, and it took us to go to Australia to actually sit down and have a conversation, right? So we were out recently at the NOCA Australia conference. We were two of, I don't know, maybe 4 or so US people who attended the conference, and it was just you know, Mike's just a good guy. He's just a nice guy. I think he just has nothing but, you know, kind of the best interests for people who are doing damage prevention, utility locating, using EM locators and GPR. But I think he just has nothing but the best intentions for the entire industry, and recognizing that if you can raise the standards for people and you can get their abilities up, then everybody benefits, right? All the stakeholders, the locators, the contractors, the communities that people are working in. So I'm going to turn it over to Mike. I want to kind of jump into it because I'm excited about this topic, because Mike brings a lot of context that I don't have to a discussion about the role that excavators play in preventing damage. So I'm going to turn it over to Mike. And Mike, why don't you give us, you know, a little bit of background, kind of your story, your history, and kind of how you got to where you are, you know, now.
Oh, thanks, Dan. It was the early 80s, and I was working as a gas leak technician for a company that manufactured equipment as well as doing services. And I liked what I did. 4 years later, I got into sales. And after I got in sales, our company started doing as a service contract locating. And I was a little intrigued by that. And the more that time went on, I wanted to learn more about the locating service. Now, we sold locating instruments, and I got to tell you, I was horrible at it at the beginning. First time I had my hands on a locator, didn't go so hot. So I was wondering how people learned how to use instruments back then, because the instruction book that got with the machine didn't seem to quite go into enough detail to learn how to get information from the thing. So over time, I kind of studied how we trained our own people. I started learning. I had the people I rode with teach me, and pretty soon I started feeling like I knew something about locating. The thing that always struck me, though, was each time I said, hey, I feel really comfortable, like I know all there is to know about this, I would learn something that I didn't know before. And I started thinking, you know what, maybe there's a lot I don't know. And as the years went by, that proved to be the case. And in the late 90s, I had a chance to write a locating training program. And this, again, is just for EM instruments. But I would say that most of what I had to learn was still in front of me. It's an amazing endeavor to learn how to teach people so that they can be efficient at learning. Teach them in such a way that A, they can understand it, and B, they can make instant use of what they've learned, and C, retain it, just remember it forever, make it intuitive. So the longer I did the Staking You program, which started in 1999, I think the better we got at it. And I would say it probably took a full 8 or 9 years to get to the point where I thought I pretty much finally got to where we needed to go with it. So that time, I've been traveling around and learning from people the best I can. And you mentioned Planet Underground TV. What we try to do with that is really show how the excavator views the world of damage prevention, because I grew up in a world where it's the facility owner view of damage prevention. And today I think there's a lot more to learn if we look at it through the lens of the excavator. So I appreciate you inviting me on the show today so we can talk about just that, the excavator view of the world for locating instruments, locating services, and wherever else this conversation leads.
Yeah, you know, it's a really interesting kind of spin to put on it, right? Which is that you came from kind of the facility side, you understood that side, and you know, it almost is like by default, obviously the facility owners are going to be concerned, right, about the damage prevention piece of it. But where we are today is definitely in a changing environment, right? I mean, kind of the plates are shifting under us almost, you know, as we're doing this interview. New people are taking responsibility, whether they want to or not, are almost being required to take this responsibility, because the system is certainly not perfect yet, right? And unfortunately, sometimes we live in the world, and I'm not saying that this is a generalization, where people want to push off as much as they can and kind of just sit in their own little narrow lane. But you know, having these kind of trainings available, like what we do, you know, certainly at LearnGPR, and like what you all do at Staking U, is becoming almost more important, because there's more people required to participate in the conservation of this infrastructure. So why don't you tell everybody then, it's a great jumping off point, you know, why don't you tell everybody from then the excavator side, or not even there yet, what's the current state of damage prevention? Who takes responsibility? What's that process like, at least in the US? Because I know that elsewhere it's different. So what does that process look like here? Who's responsible for what? And kind of where does, I guess, public responsibility end, and where does, you know, the private responsibility begin, as far as locators or contractors are concerned?
Sure. Well, in the US and parts of Canada, the system really puts the cost of locating on the facility owner. In the US, there's 50 state laws that make locating by the facility owner or their proxy mandatory.
And so by facility owner, just define what you mean by facility owner. Is that like AT&T and you know, the water authority, and that's who you're talking about?
Absolutely. Whoever actually owns the pipe or cable.
Perfect.
So since the early 70s, spreading out into the early 90s, these state laws came in effect, and today, collectively, the 811 call centers dispatch information to the utilities, the facility owners, where excavators are going to dig, and the facility owners have to go out and show them. So they're required to do it in a certain amount of time, and generally between 2 and 3 days. So when you arrive as an excavator at a dig site, you'll see markings, sometimes both paint and flag, sometimes just paint, but you'll see yellow, you'll see red, you'll see blue, you'll see green, and a few other colors. So what they have done, these facility owners who are required under law to participate in the one call system, they've marked their facilities, not their old abandoned facilities, but their new current in-use facilities. What haven't been marked are those facilities that are owned by people who are not required to be part of the state one.
Okay, so let's take this through an example, right? There's going to be construction of some sort, and they're going to have to excavate into the ground. As it currently begins to happen, who gets called? Who's responsible now for marking, right? What's the number one step, right? Step number one, we're going to excavate, step number one. And then, you know, obviously kind of in our conversation before even, you know, what's the limitation of when do people begin to think about even marking, right? I mean, so who gets called first, and when do people begin to think about this? And is it an acceptable amount of time prior to excavation, or is there a different process that people can kind of start with, right? When should people begin to think about calling?
Right. This whole process starts with the excavator and their intent to dig. So in all 50 states and parts of Canada, it's required that the excavator initiate this inquiry. And he initiates that at the one call center, either by calling 811 or going on the respective one call center website and putting in an e-ticket. So the process begins with the excavator. At that point, the call center's only role in this process is to take that information, the location and what is going to happen at the job site, and give it to those facility owners who, as I mentioned before, are required to be part of the system. So it begins with the excavator. The one call center is simply a data stream. They are a messenger. They don't locate themselves, but they put the information out to the facility owners who are impacted by this geographic area where the excavator is going to dig. And within 2 business days, 48 hours, 3 business days, 72 hours, there's different ways to word it. But in effect, between 2 or 3 days, the utilities are required to go out and mark their facilities, what they own, with paint and or flags.
And so do the facility owners themselves send out their own technicians, or do they call some sort of third-party contractor to go ahead and locate where the excavation is going to be? And then kind of question number 2 for that is, will they always test with geophysical equipment of some sort where the actual excavation is going to occur, or are there limits to where they're going to, put a technician? So where does that technician stop their job geographically, in the street, on site? Can they even go on a construction site? Who gets sent? What are they using to locate? And to mark on the ground, and then where does their kind of responsibility end? As it sits right now.
Okay, well, remind me if I forget to address any part of that 5-part question.
Yeah,
okay,
well, the next one's going to be a 17-part question, so and you got to remember all of it. So no, just go ahead. Just
thank goodness. Okay, so relative to contracting, the facility owner's responsibility. If you're a telecom company, nearly 100% of that work in the U.S. is being located by a contract locating company.
Got it. Okay.
If you're electric, probably about 90%. If you're a natural gas utility, in excess of 80% of all tickets are done by contract locators. If you're now a water or sewer owner, which is oftentimes a municipality, a council, they might call it in other parts of the world, now the rate of contract locating really drops. Most municipally owned utilities and pipelines carrying hazardous liquids or gas are generally located in-house by a person from that utility. So that's what happens there. Now, one call locating is about 99.999% performed with EM equipment only, electromagnetic locating equipment. And as we know, but just for the sake of the viewer, so we don't lose them, this EM equipment is only capable of delineating where metallic utilities are, things that have metal in them. So the other exception to the rule is that some facility owners, given the state law, may provide approximate locations without using the equipment on site. So it could be in the form of maps with measurements. It could be somebody going out to the field and saying, hey, here's where it is. So some things like that aren't excluded in every single law. But in essence, every law requires that the lines be located using the best available tools. But that's pretty much going to mean EM equipment and not GPR. And then in terms of the location where somebody stops locating, that is one of the things that starts with the excavator, because not only do they say when they're going to dig, but they say where they're going to dig. So the one call center takes these instructions and makes a place of excavation, a dig extent, if you will. So it could be as small as locate within 50-foot radius of white staking ground. It could be locate entire property. It could be locate Elm Street from 1st to 3rd. So the size varies, and some state laws may put a governor or a restriction on the amount of geographic area that can be called in with the ticket.
Got it. So if, let's say it's a building that's going to go up, and excavators or graders, right, using heavy equipment are gonna go into this lot and do it. Will the one call center cover that, or do they have to seek some other contractor or some other way in order to get it located?
Well, the law requires that members of the facility, members who are required to be part of the system, those facility owners, those utilities, locate any and all of their property, no matter where it is. So yeah, if you're a locating technician, if you're a contract locating technician and you have the gas and the electric and cable TV to locate, and part of those utilities properties are within a construction area, yeah, sometimes it takes arranging to gain access to that. For the most part, that's not the case, but when it is, if the facility owner's property is inside, there needs to be access made so those cables and pipes can be located. Yes.
Got it. Okay, so you bring up something interesting, which was, I guess telecom almost 100%, all the way down to water and sewer at 50%. And like you said, a lot of times EM will be, certainly I hate using the terms best, versus worst, but it'll be the most efficient way to sweep, across a site first, because it's a rapid detection technique. It has limitations, like you said. It's got to be able to hold that current. But nonetheless, it's fast, and you can usually delineate, unless it's highly congested and you're getting this jump of a signal, delineate actual features and say, this is the gas, this is the water, this is the telecom, whatever. Really beneficial. The I would say largest by frequency of non-metallic or non-conductive facilities is generally, what I've seen is like water and sewer, right? Where they might be using, look, it might be fiberglass, it might be ceramic, it might be concrete, it might be something else. And from my experience, as far as municipalities go, the water and gas, I'm sorry, the water and sewer tend to have right more than have GPR, or at least approaching GPR as an alternative or complementary technique. So there clearly, are other situations when it can be used. Like if there's gas and the line is broke, there's the trace wire. That's basically very few other ways that you can get at that. GPR being probably the second most popular, other than EM, if that's not coming out.
Right. Well, let me back you up just a little bit. So facilities that have non-metallic or non-tonable pipes or cables. We could throw fiber in there, obviously, as potentially a cable without any metal content. But the number one thing that's used is not GPR. It's simply measurements.
Right.
It's simply going out there and saying, my map says here it is. My eyeballs say it should be here. So yes, the gas with a tracer wire that's degraded, no longer tonable, because that industry is the only utility industry that's regulated for safety in the United States. Their burden is going to be higher from a regulatory standpoint to actually find where that is versus the water utility who's got AC pipe, and they just say, well, here we go. It should be about right here according to the map. Or the sewer utility where again, non-metallic pipe, but the person out in the field lines up the manholes. So while I would love to see GPR being used more in the one-call side of things, and this is where the facility owners are required to locate, the fact is it not being used particularly often at all in the one-call business. Now, is the percentage of times GPR is used for one-call growing? Yes, but it still represents just a sliver of all of the opportunity where, from the one-call side, that could be used. That's not to say GPR. You're taking me to the point where we're going to talk about how GPR does get used at these construction sites, but in that 24-hour period in which a locator on the one-call locating side of the equation actually has to get a ticket, process it, and then go out in the field and locate. Now, again, that's just part of that 48-hour period, but you got to realize the first 24, generally that ticket's going into queue for the next one day. State with 72 hours, you have 2 days in which to actually go out in the field to locate. So those people aren't using GPR very much at all.
Sure. And again, I mean, they're complementary techniques. And I think a whole nother conversation, I'm going to have you on here again at some point in the future, because we could do a 30 or 45 minute on cost of GPR versus, what one call, tickets are being paid. And does that integrate a system that is clearly more expensive than EM, into that process, or is it pushing it out? But I kind of want to move, to this for a second, which is, so you laid out the process, and it sounds fantastic. And let's say, just for argument's sake, people are using EM. They're also, quite a few are using GPR, because I know it's not that GPR is neglected that causes this all the time. But let's say that people are doing what they're supposed to be doing based on the current process. There are still damages that occur on a regular basis. And so everybody watching this, by the way, here's contest. And if you've won one of our contests from the GPR Hot Seat before, you cannot win again, okay? It's only you could not have won before. I will give you a personal 30-minute Skype call to answer all your questions about GPR personally. That is a multi-$100 present right there, okay? I'm getting in the holiday spirit. So I will give this to you. This is what you got to do. Go to, is it planetunderground.tv?
Correct.
Okay, you have to go to planetunderground.tv. On their homepage, the very top has a strip of recent damages. I mean, it's unbelievable how you guys curate this. I want you to pick out one of those recent damages and tweet at me the title of the article, right? So tweet at LearnGPR, the title of one of those articles. I will give you a personal 30-minute Q&A, consulting, coaching, whatever, training, 30 minutes free for you. So go to planetunderground.tv. On the top strip, find a recent hit, a recent damage, because clearly this process is not 100%, and that's what we're going to get into for the rest of this interview. So tweet me one of those headlines at LearnGPR, and the first one to do it, the first one, not all of you, the first one, get a free 30-minute Skype call with me personally to answer all of your questions, just super focused on you, okay? So point is that there are still damages. And obviously planetunderground.tv shows that there are these damages that still occur. Why do you think that's the case? And what role do other people have then, other than the one-call system? What role do other folks have to play to reduce the frequency of these kinds of hits? Go ahead.
You're talking to me and not the audience.
That's right. Yeah. That's right. Yeah. Yeah.
I didn't even have time to tweet you, Dan. So
you missed out. You missed out. I'm telling you. Yeah. But
there's a lot of excavators that the only locating they get is one call. And what are the types of things that can come back and bite them in the butt if that's all they do is I call one call? Well, there's abandoned lines that if they uncover, they don't know if they're the live or the abandoned. So there may be a mark on the ground. They go down, they find a cable and think that that's the one that's marked, but the real cable is 2 feet underneath that. They don't know that that's abandoned. And the job, the requirement of the facility owner is almost always not to give information about what's abandoned, just the active stuff. So you protect the abandoned one inadvertently and you hit the live one. So that's an issue. The non-metallic stuff, we've discussed that already. Private utilities, ones that aren't part of the one-call system. So what the first step an excavator can do to try to lower his cost of operation due to locating or lack of locating, and buy their own equipment is one. Hire a service is another. So those are essentially your two choices. And more excavators start to understand that the information they need, the totality of information they need to do their job profitably, effectively, and safely, and not only for their own crew members, but for that of the general public too, is to take on some of the cost of locating besides what they get for free from the one call. So they can either do it themselves or they can contract it, and that's about as simple as it gets.
So, okay, what's the motivation for them, to do this, to take on some of the responsibility? If there's a damage now on site and there's been a one-call ticket, but there's still damage, who feels the blowback of that? Who's financially responsible for that, when it occurs?
Every damage that occurs, whether it's the excavator's fault or not, costs the excavator. Every damage. A damage of any sort cuts into the profits for that excavator, no question. Now, whether or not they write out a check to pay the utility company for a bill or not, kind of beside the point. The amount of administrative work that goes into addressing a damage, the amount of downtime for the crew, all this stuff costs money, whether you're responsible for paying the damage or not. On top of this, profit, number one, profit. Without doing your own locating as an excavator or hiring a service to do it, you will never be as profitable as if you did these things over the course of time. Secondly, let's look at safety, the safety of your crew and the safety of others. Nothing can replace the safety factor of having post 811 locating done on your job site to truly find out all the things. Give yourself the best chance of finding all the things that are out there: private utilities, abandoned utilities, mismarked utilities, a geographic area where that you called in, but the utilities weren't located to the full extent of what was called in. Now, a prudent excavator will never dig until the one-call locators have done their job as accurately and as completely as possible. So just because the excavator through his own locating, his or her own locating would find a line that wasn't marked that clearly belongs to the phone company, that's not the time to dig. What it is time for to call an emergency locate. Hey, an incomplete ticket. This is something that needs to be done in 2 hours. Almost all states have this 2-hour window that if an excavator has waited the proper amount of time for the utilities locate and there's still a problem, an incomplete locate, a wrong locate, there's still that requirement to call in one call. So the prudent excavator doesn't correct the marks and keep on digging. So you got to put that little condition in there. But imagine if they dug and hit something that wasn't marked, they're not going to have to pay for it, but it could flood a job site, forcing them to back up from that job. This is where the hit to profitability comes in, is when you hit anything, because it's not your job site now. It's the utility owner's job site.
Right.
And it's a domino effect. Sometimes it can be a mere inconvenience. Other times it can be a huge, huge cost, even though you're not writing the check to repair the facility.
Interesting. So has the excavators themselves, what's been the response to getting their own equipment, whether it's EM and EM, plus GPR, either way? What's been the response to that? Has it been open and welcome, or has there been kind of pushback on, from the excavator side, that there's, that it's not something that they want to handle? Obviously, again, I'm sure, I know that there we've trained them that are out there who use, I don't train them on the EM, you all do that, but we've trained folks with GPR. So obviously some are accepting of it.
Yes.
But overall, as an industry, as a piece of this whole puzzle, this whole pie of everybody who's responsible, what's been their reaction to it?
It ranges. From the utility contractor side of things, I think there's probably 25-30% of the folks out there in some way, shape, or form are actually doing their own locating. Okay, so that is happening with that group. If we look at all other excavators, road builders, general contractors, et cetera, the percentage goes down. There still is a prevalent thought here that says locating is free. I shouldn't have to do that. But they also think that it should be timely, accurate, always complete, and abandoned utilities should be. The fact is it hasn't been that way for 40 years all the time. So if you just want to wish it away and say it should happen, well, you're going to be doing it for another 40 years. So those people that understand the profitability factor and the safety factor are those that have put their toes in the pool for doing their own locating. Some companies can put on paper the savings that they have from running their own locating program, or hiring, sometimes hiring their locating program out. It just kind of depends. on the circumstances and what people are doing. But what I like to hear and what we try to do at Planet Underground TV is let these people tell their peers how much money is at stake when you don't do your own locating, and they have the figures to prove it. They know what it was like beforehand. They know what it's like today. So it makes them more profitable, and it makes them and others more safe by doing it. So, but the percentages are still small, but they're growing over time. I would expect that we see excavators in the U.S. At the 50% mark, where half of them are getting their one calls and then doing some form of follow-up locating after that before they break ground.
Got it. What do you think how are they getting trained now, right? I mean, how are folks training? Are they doing an adequate job of training, their technicians? Is the excavator themselves, doing the actual locating, or is there a damage prevention department within an excavator company that's doing it, and you have people who become tasked with it so they can become proficient? Or is it the excavators, and how are they being trained up now?
Okay, well, I'm going to let you kind of tell me about GPR, whether what I say about EM is true for GPR or not. But most training that occurs out there now is manufacturer training. So you buy an instrument from XYZ company, then the salesperson from XYZ company comes out and gives your crew anywhere from a couple hours to, perhaps on the high end, a full day of training on their instrument. So that's the number one way people receive training. The effectiveness of that training is perhaps debatable, but from the manufacturers or the distributor standpoint, their job is to sell equipment, and the training that comes after the sale, if it's requested, varies from, let's be honest, very, very poor to magnificent, depending on the person. So if you put that pin in the middle, what you'll probably get is a reasonable explanation of what's in the instruction book, but not how to analyze your information sort of a training that we do at Taking You, and I suspect that you do at LearnGPR.com. So that's my opinion, but having seen this for over 3 decades, I've got enough people who have told me what I just told you. Their experience of getting it from the manufacturer versus getting it from the specialty training companies. But that's still, let's put it in percentages. I would say we're still only hitting 1-2% of all the EM users in the country. So that means it's a combination of initial sales training, just get people up and going like an instruction manual would. But then most of the training is self-taught, self-teaching. People learn through use. And I got to tell you, even with us, we can only bring people so far. We can bring them to the point where they understand the concepts in terms that they understand, ways they can understand it and retain it. But we cannot replace time out in the field. So there's no way I'm about to say somebody leaves our training class, the following Monday, they're going to be as good as they're ever going to be. No, they're going to be self-taught in addition to having our training. And whether you have our training or not, there's a lot of self-teaching in the business. That's the number one way people learn.
Yeah, I think that you could have replaced the words EM and put GPR in, and it'd be the same exact scenario. I mean, we find that up until I came, basically, or some of the stuff that you guys had done, there was almost no other training other than manufacturer training. And if it's conducted at the manufacturer's site, then maybe you have some standardization at least. But when you have distributors doing the trainings, and then within those distributors, they may have multiple sales. So you have multiple distributors, let's say across a region like North America, and then you have each distributor with multiple sales people. There's a dramatic difference in the quality of training that people get. They don't know that though, right? The end user unfortunately doesn't know that. They think they're getting the training. I mean, I speak to people all the time who say, no, we got the 2-hour training from them. And I say, that's probably just to show you how to turn it on and push it along the ground. But we see the same thing is the data itself and say with you guys, it's real time, is complex, and there's a lot of influences on what you see or hear, right? I mean, if you're getting the noise signal, and that's where the training from a professional standpoint and a third-party standpoint, who says, I don't care what system you use, I want to train you on the technology, I think is the power of your business and my business. And that's why we leave our trainings, I think, at a different level. But you're right. I mean, and this is what I said, at the end of every class, it's a 2-day, we do a 2-day intensive boot camp. It's literally 8 hours. Day one is 8 hours of me in front of your face. And luckily, I'm a pretty hyped up guy. And so, from minute 1 to hopefully, minute 600 or whatever it is, I'm still keeping people reasonably awake. But I say at the end of this 2 days, as I say, well, congratulations, now you're a beginner. Because it is both the conceptual and the experiential that makes somebody more advanced or an expert. And, we can only do so much, right? We can only spend so much time with somebody. I mean, I think you guys have a 5-day course, right? On EM, which is great. I mean, they get a lot of information from the 5 days. And I think you guys combine both classroom as well as hands-on. It's only so much. When they go out in the field, though, this is what I say, is our programs just crank up that learning curve. So when they're day one out in the field, right, that next Monday, they are in a different place than they would be, for sure, as if they didn't go through our training. And the amount of progress I think people make from day one to, let's say, day 100 of being a locator, after they have a GPR training like ours, or after they have an EM training like yours, puts them much closer to expert status or advanced status or intermediate than if they don't have our trainings. I mean, we can cut time by, I think, 70% of people being independent. And so you were talking before about profitability, and I'm sure this is the same then for excavators. Putting the equipment in somebody's hands or being comfortable to do it where they're not on a ride along and whatever, that costs money when they're on the ride along. That's somebody who's not producing on their own, right? That's time that you're spending hour by hour, dollar after dollar for that technician to learn the equipment. Even for private locators. I mean, if we can cut that, if you're going to put them in the truck for 6 months or 9 months, and I can cut 4 months off of that process, and they're 4 months of money back in your pocket plus 4 months of them producing, is a dramatic difference in profitability. So I agree with you. I think it's both. I think that you can't have one without the other. You need the experience. You also need the kind of thing that we do, and meshing those together puts people on the fast track to becoming proficient.
Right. Dan, I want to add that if I had to pick the perfect student to start with, it would be somebody with an excavating background, because they already know how utility systems run and what they look like when they're exposed, and they know the topside structures that those things should run to. So if I had to pick the perfect person to begin with from scratch on EM training, it would be somebody who had experience in underground utility construction, because they would be down the road further than just somebody who's being trained to be a locator. And secondly, I'd like to point out that if you have the opportunity, and a lot of locators don't, but if you have the opportunity to see your marks dug up, you become a lot better faster. If that can happen several times a week, you're going to be a lot better in a year than you would be if you're somebody who never actually gets to see that. Because I would be surprised at finding all of my marks exposed, because I got to tell you, I can't see below ground any more than you or anybody else can, and there's things that I will misinterpret. I'll learn from seeing that, wow, I didn't quite get that right. There's 3 instead of 2. There's 2 instead of 1. Whatever the situation is. But then if I see that and I say, wow, maybe there was a little bit of a clue, because when I pulled the instrument here, it did this. When I pulled it an equal distance the other way, it did that. Now I can see that, oh, there's the reason for it. So, and you're never going to guess from the ground exactly what you have below ground with an EM instrument and be 100% right. I'm sure that's probably exactly true with GPR. So in conclusion, if you can see your what you locate dug up at least occasionally, and you take notes of it up here, your little file cabinet you have in your head, over time, you will be a better locator sooner than somebody who doesn't have that kind of opportunity.
I completely agree as well. I mean, I say this to people all the time. I say you need 2 educations, right? You need one in the equipment and one in your industry. Certainly with GPR, we have people in, who do concrete scanning. That's a very popular application of ground penetrating radar. And the people who are the best are the ones that have, been involved in concrete construction, right? They know what's embedded in there. They understand how concrete, erodes over time and what the conditions are of concrete. Archaeologists, they're better to interpret the data collected on an archaeological site with training in GPR and archaeology than somebody who was trained in GPR but had a background in concrete construction, right? So certainly for excavators and EM, as well as GPR, I mean, the people who learn GPR best for utility looking are the folks who come out of construction, right, and the excavating realm as well. So our transition kind of into this last piece right here is, two things. Is number one is, you mentioned in a previous conversation about insurance. How is insurance going to affect this, and will it be worthwhile? What do you think is going to happen to premiums if people can get certified in EM locating and or GPR? And second is to bring it to GPR, because this is the LearnGPR channel. Is how have you seen the growth of GPR itself as far as in the locating industry and kind of all that entails? Obviously, one call is pretty low. More people continue to use EM, which I think everybody should use both if they can, right? When it's appropriate, have both in the toolkit. But where do you see GPR in the current state of affairs, and what would you like to see with GPR, kind of going forward?
Well, I suppose, unfortunately, 20 years worth of trying to sell GPR into the industry hasn't helped things right now a whole lot. There's a lot of unraveling of the past, I think, that has to be done. And unfortunately, that sets back the usage. I mean, you and I know that, hey, you don't need to find the pipe to find something that will help you in finding where utilities are. Right. If you 20 years ago believed that this was a tool that would find anything that EM didn't, you're going to be sorely disappointed. And I think a lot of people who bought GPR 10, 15, 20 years ago ended up putting it in a closet. They did so because it wasn't the thing they thought it was. And they didn't realize that, oh man, you're going to become an expert only after about 3 years of doing it. You're going to become an intermediate after a year and a half. But it didn't, because it didn't give the instant result. But again, we know that today, with the way maybe GPR is sold today, with learning some lessons in the past, and the fact that there's folks like you that are out there are able to explain the limitations and what to really expect, get the expectations in the right place to begin with. GPR is making a comeback. I don't know about the I don't know about the sales of units and this and that in the underground utility detection business any more than I know them for archaeology or anything else. But my feel is this, is that, my Lord, if you don't understand that EM can only do some things, and that GPR can do some of the things that EM can't, and that the two in unison are your best insurance for finding all that is at an excavation site, then let us help you understand that, because these are the two commercially available things. Yeah, there's acoustic. Acoustic is small, new. It will be great one day, but again, they're going to go through this cycle where people are going to buy acoustic thinking this can find anything that GPR can't. They're going to be disappointed. So it's really up to the user being able to detect differences, remember things, see patterns, not patterns that don't exist, but patterns that do exist. So having GPR on a job site can provide you information about your job site, even if it doesn't find every single thing that EM can. That's the understanding that I think a lot of folks are starting to get, but they're still in the minority. So we want to help the manufacturers of both EM and GPR with what they do by saying there's just not enough locating going on. There needs to be a lot of locating in design stage, and customers, project owners need to pay for that if they want the cheapest and most profitable project. The excavators, same thing for them. So I don't care whether you're EM or GPR, there's still more out there that needs to be done to get more locating so that the excavator has a better shot at doing it safely and efficiently, and importantly, profitably.
Yep. And one thing I think that's missed a lot of times from the excavator's perspective, right? When you have contract locators, they're zoned in on finding the pipe or finding the utility. Excavators themselves, however, can benefit from additional information that GPR can provide, which is why it's a great complement to EM. And for everybody watching, we did a video that compared the two of them. I'll try to remember to put that in the description. But a benefit of GPR, which I don't even think I put in the video, was it can give you information on things like how deep is bedrock, right? Which, if you're an excavator, you want to know that. If you want to, how deep is the water table? What's that going to affect? How is that going to affect the machine that you might use, or what you need to have on site, or what you need to be prepared for? GPR can identify the depth to the water table, the depth to bedrock, the geological layers, and it's all the same data set. And so, it's limited for sure, and I've gone over these limitations, exhaustively. But I think a nice benefit for the excavators, the excavation industry, is that it goes beyond just the damage prevention as far as the buried facilities, and can give you additional contextual information prior to excavating that might help considerably in strategizing, how you're going to approach a particular site, And so I think that they're great complements to each other as well. So any last words? Not to say this is your, dead, right? So what would you say to everybody kind of who has watched? What's a nugget you want them to leave with, and then let everybody know kind of, again, where they can find you, where they can find, Planet Underground TV, Staking You, maybe the date of an upcoming class or something like that.
Well, let's kind of go back to where we started, with the one call system. Look, I would be hugely disappointed if 20 years from now we're still doing everything exactly the same way, because that only solves part of the problem. The way other parts of the world do it, where the maps are shared between excavators and other utilities and engineering companies, I love that aspect. And just culturally, we don't do that in the United States. So I want to say that there's no one perfect system, but the perfect system is going to be a blend of existing things today and the addition of easily accessible repositories of underground utility location. I mean, that's the future. And you can't get a lot of that information unless you're using all available technologies at all opportunities. So rah, more locating, but that's exactly what needs to happen. But that alone can't solve all the problems. We have to come to an understanding that the information that can be confirmed needs to be in a repository somewhere, like a bank, a place where you can deposit, you can make a withdrawal. There needs to be multiple utilities on one map that's spatially accurate. And as we do more excavation, the excavators need to be incented for capturing the information they can while the hole is open. For forever here in this country, we've depended on locating information, and then when the excavator has a chance to get information, even if they grab it, the utility says, well, what am I going to do with that? We got to change that. We got to break out of that. So the most interesting part of this business for me is to try to help what I know is ultimately going to happen come a little sooner, accelerate that change, where every time somebody opens up a hole, every time everybody uses a locating instrument, that information is captured. So I guess in conclusion, I really, especially to our U.S. audience, the excavator is not the problem. The excavator is the solution for damage. Yeah. And the more we all understand that, I think the better off everybody will be.
Excellent. No, that's a great point, is that, right, they're not the problem, they are the solution, and it's equipping them with the right tools to help them do their job, with the greatest amount of safety and the least amount of damage, to important infrastructure that's buried below the surface. Is a great way to, I think, kind of end this. So everybody, again, I did put Mike's contact information in the description below. Make sure that you check them out at planetunderground.tv. Make sure that you hit them up on Twitter, Facebook, and subscribe to their YouTube channel. And subscribe to this YouTube channel as well. If you found that this was helpful and you think somebody else might benefit from it, please share it around. And if you go over to learngpr.com, put your name and email address in, You can sign up for our free introductory video. It's about 30 or 40 minutes, gets all the basics of GPR down, the fundamentals, and we will send you free training videos every single week. So Mike, thank you so much. I appreciate it. It's been a pleasure. And next time we get together, we shouldn't go, across the world in order to meet up, but somewhere here. I'd love to have you back on because I feel there's so many more things that we could talk about as it relates to damage prevention, underground, utilities, and kind of the way you left it, which is getting a database, right? How do people begin to integrate with each other? I think is certainly one of the big pushes over the next, 20 years in this space. And I'd love to kind of hear your opinions on that for an entire episode. So thank you.
Thanks for having me. I look forward to coming back. It's been a lot of fun, Dan. Thank you very much.
Oh, my pleasure. All right, thanks.